Welcome to a very special edition of All About Design. We spend many hundreds and thousands of pounds on our houses, but quite often we forget to look at what is through the window. And more, there is a link between interior design and exterior design or garden design. And additionally, curb appeal is really important when you come to selling your house. So I'm really excited to welcome Dani King, the garden designer, who's going to talk us through the whole process of how we can bring interior and exterior design together. So welcome, Dani. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Could you tell me just a little bit about how you arrived to be a landscape designer?
Well, it's an interesting one. From a very early age, I had both parents who absolutely adored gardens. So my dad was very creative. He would design his own waterfalls and planting,
wow.
quite amazing. And my mum is amazing at making anything survive and thrive. So she would be there digging, weeding, planting. So that was as an early age, my experience in the garden. And we'd always be helping, digging, cleaning up ponds, just a bit of everything in the garden. So that was my childhood, which was a lovely way to be brought up. I've always loved property development, and the property development is both inside and outside.
Yeah.
And primarily the outside excites me.
Okay.
And so as time moved on, my career just evolved into creating beautiful gardens for clients.
Okay. You had quite a corporate role for many, many years.
Yes,
so
I
was it
did.
always something you just wanted to go and do?
Yes, I did have a corporate life for about 35 years, really, which was a lovely environment to be in. I learned lots of things, but my heart was always in my hobby job, which was what I used to do outside of work. Not that I didn't love what I did while I was in the corporate world, but the creativity and the passion comes from being in the garden with nature.
So how did you make that change? How did you take the leap to start up your own company?
I think you get to a certain time in life where you can make that leap from working in a company and then did the training with Oxford College of Garden Design and then set up my own business as a garden designer. Yeah, so it was
amazing.
fantastic.
And I guess you've never looked back.
Not for a minute. In fact, I haven't stopped working from the minute I started. Through recommendation and referral, we've been busy creating gardens in lots of different places in the UK, but it's extended to people's holiday homes in America and South Africa and France and various other places. So I've been really privileged to have that opportunity.
That's incredible. I mean, you should be very proud of that success. That's amazing. I'm always intrigued how the design of the garden has changed from, 50 square piece of lawn and maybe a few pot plants. Why is so many homeowners used to overlooking the fact that the garden can add so much value to the house?
Well, I think a key aspect was COVID, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think all of a sudden people were stuck in their homes, but they couldn't go outside. Whereas before they would go on holiday for the relaxation, they would go to restaurants, pubs, parks. And this time in everyone's lives, which was a horrendous time for so many people, that they were looking at their home and within those four walls. And whether that be an apartment with a window box or whether that be a big unruly garden and everything in between. They were looking at their garden as part of their house rather than just a garden. And they wanted those garden areas to become a usable, functionable space that they felt safe, that they could extend their interiors into their garden and use that space more effectively.
I agree. So how do you approach the design process if somebody calls you in? What would you do?
Well, the first thing I think is the most important thing is to sit and listen to somebody and understand exactly what their thoughts, issues, concerns, ideas, likes are. I think it's very much to going back to the corporate world. It would be literally asking a few questions and seeing what people need. It's various things within a garden design. It's what you need. It's how you use the space. It's who uses the space. It's when they use the space. It's what they're looking for as an experience when they're in their garden. All of those things. And not only that, it's when you're in the house looking at the garden, what they want to see there as well. It's not just while you're in there. So all of those things need to be taken into account in equal measures.
And do you think it should be a flow through of the house design and style, or do you think sometimes it can be different on purpose?
I think depending on what the client's looking for, really, I think as you would do with a house, you can either have a house that flows from room to room with slight accent changes, but you can also juxtaposition a really sharp room with a really contrasting, relaxing room, and you can do the same in the garden. I think the things that you need to really consider are the feeling that you want to have and how you use that space, because you can have different sections within each garden that can give you
Mm.
a calming space, a bright, zingy place, some fun. It can be a mixture of all of those things. And as long as there's a trail that runs through it that ensures that they all harmonise together as a cohesive design in the same way that you would a whole house, then I think it works.
So if somebody has a garden and they feel that they want to do something too, where should they start? Should they get a piece of paper and start sketching it out before they come to see you?
Well, I'm more than happy to help them with that. I think that the first thing, if it's somebody that wants to do something on their own and they want to just utilise their garden a little better, I think that the number one thing they need to do is take a piece of paper and write down all the things they want in their garden, all the things they need, and all the things. It's almost like a SWOT analysis. It's what I love, what I don't love, what I need, and what I don't need, and likes and dislikes in your garden. And then other people to come into your garden and say, well, I really like this bit, or I don't like this bit. Well, look at the light and go, well, it's really dark garden and don't get much light, and I only get light over there, but the patio's over here. And really start asking the questions about, again, what you want to use the garden for, who wants to use it, when, for what purpose, and how. So I think writing that list is the key thing. Then to invite somebody like myself or other like-minded garden designers in to really drill into those questions a little deeper to understand exactly what they need and challenge their thoughts and ideas, so that you can talk through and develop a sort of storyboard of what's needed, coming with some ideas, maybe some mood boards, maybe just ideas generally about what's needed. I think that's the next step.
Yeah. So it becomes quite visual then.
Yes, it does.
In the journey.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
And it's important to be realistic.
Yeah.
Because we see so many beautiful images.
Yeah.
But is it something that they could maintain themselves within the realms of work-life balance?
Absolutely.
And I think that's the same in all design. We've got to be realistic on who's living there. Like you say, you're fitting it to their lifestyle very much like an interior would be.
Absolutely. So it's exactly that. I think the key things are part of the questioning is, how much maintenance do you want? How often are you going to be in the garden? Who's there to look after it? Do you want an easy maintenance garden? Do you want something you want to be in and work on day in, day out? Because some people love to be in their garden and are very happy to have a high maintenance garden. But other people just want it to look fabulous all year round without any stress, because they come home from work and they don't want to be bothered with it. They just want it to look as good as possible with very minimal maintenance. So all those questions are very key.
Are you ever involved with a new build project and with the architect, looking at what's the view through that window going to be and what's our focal point? Nowadays, we're a bit more aware of what's outside the window. I think, again, it's since COVID, people have woken up to, oh gosh, the house and the garden should have that link in interior design, the well-being that having an environment around you, not just pleasing visually, it's so good for your health, and garden space is even more so. So if you can get in at the beginning with an architect, that must be incredible.
I do that quite a lot. I work very closely with several architects locally, and that is an integral part, whether it's an extension, whether it's a new build, or even whether it's an existing garden that will probably need to be renovated. The key aspects are the visual lines. I always say the topography, we call them topos, but the topography of the garden, and also in relation to the sun and the movement of the sun. So those are really key things. But I totally agree. The impact of having a beautifully placed planting border or tree uplit. I'm a real believer that it's not the ideal thing to have furniture right next to a big patio door. So I try and push that sort of. You don't want to be sitting looking at legs of chairs and things like that. So trying to have something planting nearer the windows that then brings the nature in and gives you a barrier from furniture. Always helps as well.
That's a really good point. And especially in the winter, if you do have to cover it up and all you've got is this great big black shape outside your lounge window. It's a really good thing to think about. You mentioned lighting there, but again, in the UK, I don't think it's something that we've really embraced as much as we could, because if you've got a window looking onto the garden and it's not lit, it's like a big black hole out there. So getting some lighting in, how do you go about, what do you aim to do when you do that?
Well, that's a real key element. It's something that I always think about. I really like low spike lighting within planting borders. As I mentioned earlier about having planting borders that break up big slabs of paving, so you're not in massive chunks of paving, because you need places where you can put your table and chairs, the chairs can move out and we can walk around them. But also it's nice to have it broken up with other areas, including planting. And those can be uplit. There's something really lovely if you've a border along the side maybe, and then a raised bed with a feature olive tree in it, uplit with some, low planting underneath it. It'll look gorgeous all year round. Very little maintenance, as long as it isn't planted with soil that doesn't drain away, because olive trees obviously need very good drainage. But things like that architecturally, and that could work in a tiny little courtyard garden equally as well as it would work in a very large garden, as I did recently with Sherborne Manor.
And also you can integrate other things like sound into the garden. Yes. It's quite an easy exercise to get electricity into the garden. Lighting systems is one thing, but I guess you could get power in for having music and other things going on. So you could charge your phone when you're down the garden.
And also internet is another key thing. There's other internet in your house will probably go so far, and then you might get to the bottom of your garden, which gives you afternoon light, and you haven't got the internet. So little areas where you can put in receivers. I mean, there's all sorts of lighting, and there's all sorts of speakers. Some of them are built in rocks, so you can. There's lighting and the speakers that can actually be set in amongst your plantings, hidden, so that you can't see any of that sort of thing. It's amazing what you can put into your garden now, to be able to maximise the use of your garden through all the seasons and through early morning to late at night. All these different aspects are really helpful.
Actually, having the internet in the garden is something I've not thought about, but it would be so useful. Otherwise, you're chained to the house if you work from home, and you've got this lovely garden out there that you want to use in the few months that we can. Wow, what a great idea.
The bottom of my garden's quite a long way. I've got a long, thin garden. I've got a little garden hut, and we take our little Bose speaker down there. We've got a heater that's built in. So to take a bottle of wine in the evening, listen to our music, a little bit of lighting. It's a very relaxing place to be.
So you're using it, getting out of the house into the garden. What can we do to support the wildlife in our gardens? There's a few things we've seen, like the little bee, bee hotels and
the insect hotels,
bricks with things and weeds that we can do to attract wildlife. Do you think?
I mean, there's all sorts of things we can do to attract wildlife, and I think it's really important for the ecosystem of the garden and for us as human beings, really. I think the start is good planting. It's ensuring there's food, there's water, there's shelter. And I think if we've got all of those things and it's a welcoming environment, non-threatening, and lots of people have got cats, I've got dogs, that could be quite difficult for certain wildlife. So it's ensuring that some wildlife can thrive in amongst all of the things that us human beings bring to a garden, then that will certainly help bring the wildlife to you.
The well-being and positive health benefits of gardens are becoming more clear. Do you build this into your designs? What other things are there that we can bring to the garden to really aid that?
I think the number one thing in a garden that we can provide that feeling of comfort and relaxation is a well-designed garden with a good balance and areas that you can sit and reflect. There's areas where you can entertain, areas where it can take you away from all the noise and buzz of the everyday. And it be tranquil, whether it be in the sun or whether it be in the shade, and probably preferably a bit of both, because we don't want to be sitting in the baking sun, and we also don't want to be sitting in a dark, cold corner. But I think an integral part of designing the garden correctly will enable the homeowner and the garden user to have that space, and that can include lighting, planting, water features, and they will all enhance. But then you can do that without any of those things, as long as the actual space itself is well balanced and tranquil, and you've got comfy furniture, then that all helps to make you feel better in your garden.
Yeah. And do you think things like it's good to build in storage for all this, seat cushions drive me mad, because I've got a an L-shaped unit last year.
Yeah.
And then it's like every time you go outside, you've got to get 24 cushions out. So it's
True.
great to have it built in, I guess.
Yes. And there's all sorts of types of garden furniture. There's some that I've specified in recent gardens where the furniture is almost like that yacht fabric. It's like leatheretty type fabric. So then it's waterproof. I think the storage within a garden is essential for all sorts of things, but also not to be, front and center.
No.
It's got to be balanced and carefully thought out.
So you could almost build that into
Absolutely.
like a banquette seat that
Maybe.
lifts up,
Yes.
perhaps.
Yeah. As long as it's, sort of watertight, then brilliant. And if people are buying furniture, quite often they come with cushions.
Yeah.
And then that's, they need somewhere and not too far away.
No.
Nothing worse than hoiking it up through the front of the house into the garage and then back out into the back garden by the time the sun's gone in.
Exactly. And then you just won't use it, will you?
No.
We've talked about the saleability of a house, but have you had experience where it's really added a lot of value onto a property?
Absolutely. As my last 30 years of developing properties is a testament to primarily, it's as much about developing the property as it is about developing the garden. And the garden is another room. So often it is overlooked. And it is an expensive ticket item. People think, oh, how much can I do a bit of patio and a few plants? And they go, oh my gosh, that costs such a lot of money. It is an expensive item, but it is another room. And that other room, if you think about how many rooms are in a house plus the garden room, it adds square meterage effectively of usable space. It may not be underneath the roof, but it is still usable space within the property and will add significant value and has definitely added significant value to the properties that I've developed and sold.
That's really, really interesting. And if you were going to put your house on the market and the front garden, for example, looked a bit lackluster, could you give us maybe top things you could do to create a fantastic first impression?
Well, if you don't want to spend any money at all, the first thing I would do is mow the lawn, trim the edges, and weed the patios, and also weed the planting beds, trim things back and tidy them up. Secondly, if you've got a fencing, to make sure that's painted. And if you want to spend a little bit more money and add a little spark, then I would put in a few evergreen shrubs of different colours. So some variegated with the lighter coloured leaves, some darker leaves, some different textures, and then at different heights, so that it creates interest. And maybe a couple of plants that have got some flower. Depending on the year, and maybe just a couple of pots dressed nicely with some annuals and colour, anything that's in colour within that season. And that's definitely the way to go.
And actually paint your front door. Because I can now paint you PVC front doors, so you can have any colour you want. If you've got a brown PVC front door, which is a little bit dated now, you can get the right paint, and suddenly that's such a massive difference. So you can instantly uplift, I think. Are there any garden trends that don't age well, do you think?
It's an interesting question. I think it's paving primarily. It's like everything if in your bathroom you went way out and had something that's really fashionable now, in a year, 2 years' time, that won't be fashionable. So I tend to go very subtle and more natural and more neutral on the paving, and then add some colour with the planting.
Last year I painted my fences in the garden from brown to a very pale green, which was a labour of love because it needed about 5 coats. It's a bit of one of those questions, what colour your garden fence is, but what do you think? Is there a no-no, or does it not really matter? Like dark grey, is that good to have, or just neutral and natural? Because if you don't paint them ever, they age better, don't they? Once you start painting them, then you've got to keep on painting them.
I think it's a really good question. So there's a couple of rules of thumb. The darker the fence line, it loses itself in colour. In fact, there is a little green colour, and it's called invisible green. It was being created by a landscape architect alongside little green, and it literally is invisible green. So it's a very dark green, and when you paint the fence, the actual fence sort of disappears. I always paint mine black.
Okay.
And at first you go, oh my gosh, it's a black fence. But in reality, when you put planting next to it, the planting pops, the green pops. If you have a lighter colour, gorgeous. I think they can look really lovely, and especially if they tie your house with your garden, fantastic. It is quite a lot of maintenance to do that. So it just depends on how much your fencing is an prominent part of your garden.
Yeah.
How much you want to try and knock that back and have the planting as the star. I think if you start putting strong colours or light colours into your fencing, that will make it more prominent. But that can be a good thing, because sometimes some people want a prominent fence.
Yeah.
And it just depends on your personal preference.
Yeah. What advice would you give to someone who's got a very small outdoor space, for all the reasons we've said about mental well-being, getting outside, and the good feelings that gives you? What can they do in a very small space?
I think a very small space is always an interesting space to garden design, and we quite often get given larger spaces because people need help with the larger spaces, but it's the smaller spaces that need equally as much help. I love designing both, but a small space you can really create a perfect personality in as a specific room, especially if it's walled or fenced, can be absolutely lovely. The number one thing is to check the light, where it's going to be showing in the areas, pooling of light into the patio. Create a little bit of patio, whether it's decking, whether it's paving, somewhere where you can actually put a chair or a table and chairs, even if it's just a very small, tiny little bistro set. Just enough for you to be able to sit, have a coffee, glass of wine, read a book, chat with friends. And then around the outside of that, bring in plants planted around the edge of the fence line or wall, higher at the back, lower at the front, so it gives a bit of colour and relief. And that will create the most beautiful, tranquil space, as will maybe the use of mirrors.
Oh, lovely, yes.
Obviously not facing south-facing, east or west, but north-facing walls, perfect to volume into a room, and also lighting.
Yeah, and maybe a small water feature.
A small water feature would be fantastic.
Sounds lovely.
Yes,
and they don't have to be expensive, do they?
Not at all. I know you talked about lovely finds from antique and reclamation. You can find all sorts of amazing things in reclamation yards, and they can be turned into a very simple, very cost-effective, but fantastic water feature.
What's the best garden you've ever visited? That's a big question, and why?
Oh, best garden I've ever visited. Oh, that is a really good question. I think a lot of hotels have the most stunning gardens. I think the hotel gardens, specifically the Le Manoir, I think has the most beautiful garden. It's obviously manicured with an inch of its life. It has so many different aspects. It's very calming. It's very relaxing. It also has fun. There's things you can do in there like croquet. There's a tea garden to walk through. There's water. There's ornaments, structures, sculptures, places to sit. I think it has a lot of wow factors.
Formal gardens are very beautiful but high maintenance. And I would say probably herbaceous borders of old, you need a lot of knowledge to know what plant's going to succeed the plant that's just flowered and then gone off. And a lot of cost, I imagine, to set one up. But they do look incredible. But you've got to then put in the time to keep that looking great.
I mean, we've done quite a lot of both, creating formal gardens for large formal houses, but also perennial gardens, perennial borders within more formal gardens. And they do take a lot of hard work to design. They take a lot of hard work to maintain, to keep them looking good, to balance. I put some evergreen structure in amongst a perennial border so that in the dead of winter, there is always something good to look at. And then in between that, the various heights and levels and colours that create harmony throughout the growing months and flowering months is something lovely to see.
And that's a really good point, because wintertime, you close the garden down late autumn, and then it sort of looks okay for a little bit, and then it's quite dire December and January, and it can be quite depressing. So I guess to put that evergreen to get you through the hard times and some very early flowering, this time of year it's a bit grim out there. What sort of things would you put in a garden to cheer you up in February?
Well, there's lots of things. So to start with the structure. So I always start with the planting with evergreen structure. So that can be quite often some maybe Nellie Stevens, ilex, holly, smaller holly trees, maybe half standard. So they sit about 5 foot tall in total with a nice head on them, beautiful red berries, and they're vibrant this time of year. So viburnum has got beautiful colour this time of year in terms of evergreen. Also, without worrying at all throughout the year, but will always show well this time of year specifically because everything else has died down, is an evergreen shrub. And variegated evergreen shrubs next to dark green evergreen shrubs, so like taxus, next to pittosporum, which have got a lovely lighter, brighter colour, all different shades of pales, greens, creams, silvers with each other make a lovely colour contrast.
Yeah, that's the thing you need as
and
well,
texture.
Yeah.
And then when you really want to go for a little bit of a pop, I would go for the hellebores, gorgeous this time of year, and they keep on giving. There's lots of different varieties. You know, anything, if you just wanted a calming green and white garden, then you've got the perfect white together with the snowdrops that are popping up. And you can get early narcissi, little daffodils, that are also around and pop this time of year.
And hellebores, I keep looking at them and then I think, well, what will they be like in the middle of summer?
Okay.
Can you leave them there or should they not be in a sunny border? It's just a plant I've never bought and yet I'm really intrigued with them because they're just so pretty.
So hellebores are shade loving. So in a woodland garden throughout the year, they're fine. Obviously, they only flower in the winter months. Another little thing about hellebores I absolutely love, and you really should, I will buy you one for your garden. It's irrelevant of what colour you have. They come in all sorts of lovely deep burgundy through to pale white, pink, gorgeous. And when you actually look into the head of them, they are stunning. You could cut the little heads and float them into little candle holders or a glass vase in amongst floating candles. This time of year, they bring the outside in beautifully. But in the middle of the summer, as you know, asking, if they are in a slightly warmer border, but I wouldn't plant them in full sun anyway, they are evergreen. So you have the leaves, and then in between that, I would be planting things that like shade, but will give you colour throughout the summer.
Okay, right.
Yeah, in a woodland border. And that yet again brings me back to the low-growing evergreen plants that have got variegated leaves, so you could plant those next to each other.
Yeah.
So you've got your hellebores with the flowers in the winter, but underneath and around those, you would have maybe euonymus. I like emerald gaiety and harlequin varieties because they've got a nice variegated leaf, and that will give you the highlighter.
When you plan your gardens, do you plant three of one thing together? Is that what we do instead of just one here, one there to get a bit of impact? And a second question alongside that, obviously, you know, we can look at a plant in the back garden centre and, you know, 2 foot high and, that's perfect. It's really important to check scale, isn't it?
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. The 3-5-7 rule.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. Before I ever knew anything about gardens and garden designs, you know, I would be looking at, I like that one, I like that one, I like that one, and having one of everything I really like. Not really taking into account when it flowers, how high it's going to grow, how much it's going to take over something else, whether it likes the sun or the shade or whatever. And I think that's another key aspect of having your garden professionally designed by whoever you choose to do that, because they will save you time, money and effort and loss of plants, which is one of the biggest things because they cost a lot of money. And to see them fail because they haven't been planted in the right place, or they'll overtake so many other things and choke the plants is a really key element. But in terms of planting, I think 3s, 5s, 7s, quite often, depending on the plant, to have those in a swathe, it makes it look like it's a professionally designed garden in a funny sort of way.
Yeah.
And I think the way that it flows, and also having rhythm. So if you do your 3 here and 2 there, 3, 5 and 7 there, and then maybe one taller thing, and then you repeat that. So it's repeated every metre or every 3 metres down a long border, whether it's perennials, whether it's evergreens, will really make this part of the calming, relaxing flow, but also make it really look like a beautifully designed garden.
And actually makes your life a bit easier because then you haven't got to go and find 40 different plants.
Absolutely.
You need to maybe find 12 that you repeat several times.
Yes.
If you had a blank canvas for a family garden, what things would you prioritise?
I suppose if it's a family garden, I'd need to understand what the family need. Are they sporty? Do they need to kick a ball? Do they need a net? Do they need water and enjoy their garden? Do they need a climbing frame? If that was the case, then we would create a specific area for that. Are they keen on eating out together in the sun, or do they like to be in the shade? And how many people are in that family? How many additional friends and family come to join them? If you've got a family, how much time have you got to maintain? Also, if you've got young children and they like to kick a ball, then it needs to have planting that can stand up to that and enough area for them to be able to balance that.
Yeah.
But also the balance between paving, planting, mown lawn.
Yeah.
is key. And then on top of that, somewhere to put all the clutter. Because if it's a family, they'll have scooters and, toys and tools, cushions, maybe,
Yeah.
and it all needs to be able to be put away. But I don't want to be looking into someone's garden and then the first thing I see is the shed.
Yeah.
So creating those areas and then making it all harmonise is the key, I think.
It's a very good point. Like a playroom in the house, isn't
Yes,
it? If you need storage for whatever you have. It's so important just to make the design sing. Otherwise, you spent all that money and then you've got 27 used plant pots around the side of the house, and it's just spoils the magic. Can you give us some great colour schemes for, let's say, the spring? If we were going to go to the garden centre this weekend and plant bulbs or grab a few lovely flowering shrubs, what's a really nice colour scheme for the spring?
Well, I would say there's two different colour tones, or three actually, to be honest. I'd go three different colour tones. My personal favourite, we'll go with that first, is white, blues and lemons in the spring.
Nice.
So there's a lot of plants in the spring that will give you those three colours. So anything from narcissi to tulips, the little grape hyacinths, pale blues, whites, those forsythia that comes out this time of year, absolutely lovely in amongst the greenery.
Sounds very pretty.
Another one would be the pinks. So yet again, in your spring, you can go more lilacs, mauves, blues. With the tulips, you would do that. I'd stick very light with your narcissi so that they don't clash.
Yeah.
So it's more like a white tone to go with the lilacs and the blues. And then comes in your alliums. Oh, massive. Christophe allium that's as big as the head, really, and all the other darker purples. They're really lovely. And then you could go with a really dark tulip to mix with those colour schemes. And the other one, if you really want a punch of colour, then yellows, orange, red, big tulips, big bright masses of narcissi and daffodils would be the way to go with a riot of colour.
I always struggle with this. Do you cut off the heads of the daffodils once they finish flowering, because you've got them sort of hanging around for ages, the green stems? Meant to let them, all the goodness, go back into the bulb for the following year, aren't you? But they look a bit untidy and they really annoy me in my garden. What do you do?
I tend to go happy medium. I'll leave them long enough to give them a little bit of energy to go back into the bulb, and then trim the tops. And over time, I would just, when they're starting to look tatty, I think the key thing is, you don't want a garden that looks tatty. The other thing I would do, and I tend to do with bulbs, specifically ones with long leggy leaves, is I'll plant them in amongst evergreen shrubs. So my favourites are Pittosporum, and all my teams know that I'm a Pittosporum fan. So they come in all shapes and varieties, from a very dark green golf ball to a silver ball to
Is it a grass? Is it?
No, they're a shrub.
Oh, okay.
With a little like crinkly leaf, really. Some are a little bit rounder. Some of them look like a box ball, and because of box blight, a lot of people have been looking for alternatives. So you go Taxus, which is the yew hedging dark green, quite spiky, or you can go for this Pittosporum golf ball, which is an absolute winner. So I'd probably plant those in ball shapes, and then in between that I would tuck the bulbs so that when they do flop around a bit, it doesn't matter, it's part of the structure.
That's a great tip. And do you tend to dig up things like tulip bulbs and store them over the winter?
Yes. In fact, to be honest, tulips for me, I prefer them in planters for that reason. I have put them in the ground on occasion, but I'm not one for digging up, taking them out, moving them around. I don't have enough time. But if I'm refreshing a planter for what's going to come in the summer, then I'm more than happy to do that.
And how long did it take you to get a really good knowledge of the thousands of garden plants?
Oh my gosh, there are thousands. You never stop learning and you never stop developing your style. I think. I think everyone's got their own style, and every garden is an individual garden. So what you think is going to work for one garden won't work for another garden.
No.
In the same way that we all have our own personalities. So I think it's a constant learning every day. I learn about a new plant. I'm obviously keeping, my ears to the ground within the industry, new plants that are being developed, and then looking at combinations and just looking at nature and seeing what looks good next to each other, and trying to replicate that in people's gardens. I think the more natural, the more calming it becomes.
Do you watch Gardener's World and other programs like that? Do they give you?
Yes, I do. I mean, I'm glued to Chelsea,
Of course,
obviously.
yeah.
And there's lots of other garden landscape professionals that I'll watch and read. Everyone's got something good to offer, something. I'm always learning.
I think in design, it's never standing still, but it is sometimes going around in a big circle. And as you say, it's interesting, like, as colour schemes in houses date and look old fashioned, there are certain garden trends suddenly look a bit dated.
Totally. Interesting one. If you look back in, say, the 1970s, when I look back at what my dad was doing in his garden, there was a definite trend for crazy paving and lots of conifers.
Yes.
That grew, Leylandii and other conifers that started off this size and ended up being taller than the house.
Yeah.
Far too close to a window.
Yeah.
And rockery, there's rockery that's in, rockery that's out. And it is quite interesting that is not necessarily a trend, but in certain gardens, it still looks great.
Yeah.
And in other gardens, it doesn't really work.
What are the most common mistakes you see people make in their garden?
It's a really good question. I think number one is planting one of everything. And as we mentioned before, not really understanding how that is going to thrive or overtake other plants. I think putting the patio in the wrong place is a massive issue. I think those are the two key things that I come across all the time.
Actually, we're listened to, I was really pleased to see, in 66 countries around the world. We've got some listeners in New Zealand, we've got listeners in Lapland, we've got listeners in California. So you've got experience of planting in South Africa. But I guess soil type has a massive amount to do with everything.
Yes, it does. When I design gardens for Melinda of M2 Exteriors in Nashville, who I've been working with since I trained at Oxford College of Garden Design. I design gardens with her, and she develops those gardens with her team, and has done for many, many years. But they are homes for 24/7, all year round. We have to be very aware of the planting that will survive in that particular environment. Nashville have had snow for a very long time, sitting snow. So there are very few plants that we can specify in that area. So you have to be very clear. So soil type is important. The plant themselves is very important. How much irrigation they're going to get. And also the windburn, the sunburn, all of those things make a huge impact.
Yeah.
I tend to, like in South Africa, agapanthus grows like weeds. It is amazing. They are everywhere. They're absolutely stunning, like fireworks. So they are a plant that you could plant and not worry about. And roses grow there really, really well as well. Other plants won't survive quite so well at all. So you have to be very conscious of each country. And what you can and can't plant.
It's easier now with the internet. You can even get apps on your phone to see a plant you like, take a picture, and it will say, oh, that's so-and-so, and it needs a northerly aspect and not much irrigation. Again, it's the research, isn't it? Making sure you don't waste money on those things. We have a mutual client, which is how we met actually. And in their amazing garden design, you put some corten steel rectangular arches. Door frames, yeah. And they look incredible. Is that something you really like to do? Put some sort of architectural finds into the garden?
Absolutely. And I think as a key element of garden design, and it's something we were taught very early on, is that it isn't just a horizontal plane. It has vertical planes as well. And where the opportunity arises, I'm not saying that every single garden should have a vertical plane, because it creates shadows and sometimes that it's not conducive. But in this particular garden, for the client that we both know locally, we needed something to take us through the path and walk us through the garden. There was lots of already large evergreen structural plants, and in amongst that I needed to create some extra borders and then something to take you from the house to the garden room that you absolutely beautifully interior designed. And, it was really interesting that we didn't know each other at the time.
No.
And it made the garden room absolutely sing.
Oh.
It was stunning.
Yeah.
And also flowed. What we did on the outside, it flowed beautifully with what you did on the inside.
And the lighting at night, as soon as the lights come on in the early dusk evening, it's like a film set. It's incredible. That's, for me, is where I spoke a bit more to having lighting in the garden, because put my hand up and say, it's not something I've done. I really love getting my garden looking beautiful during the day, and then you close the shutters on it, and you wouldn't need to if you actually had that extra room out there. It's lit beautifully. When I was designing hotels, we quite often get a large budget to find something beautiful, like a David Harbour sundial or artillery sphere, or
gorgeous,
some sort of sculpture. Is that something you'd really like to sort of put into gardens?
Absolutely. I absolutely love any form of sculpture or structure. I have a sculpture in the back of my garden, and it's something that I found in Mallorca actually, and I had it shipped back to the UK. And it's a corten steel. It sits probably about 60 centimetres high, and it's almost like an open book, but the middle of it has got a polished concrete. It's absolutely lovely, and I've had it in every single garden. It's heavy as hell, but it's in every single garden, and at the moment it's sitting in amongst my shrubbery, and it's uplit, and it looks gorgeous. Before, I've had it on a patio where it is the centre stage, and it's a real talking point. I'm always looking. Before now, I've had a roll top bath. A roll top bath, literally under a tree with hanging glass balls with tea lights in.
Beautiful.
And then bits of planting in and around it. So, and then a water feature, which is literally like a shower head in copper.
Yeah, beautiful.
Just coming into the bath. It's quirky, it's interesting. I mean, some people are like, oh, that's a bit way out for me. But other people love that sort of thing. Another garden that I worked on a while ago with a mutual friend, Don from Hyden Gardens. We created an outside shower, and that was with a copper head, which is next door to their sauna, steam room, and hot tub section of the garden, with planting round it and beautiful paving that Dom's done with his team. And that as well is another feature. It isn't just an outside shower. It's a piece of art in itself.
Sometimes you build a room around the artwork, or you might have a vase or a cushion or something that's got lots of different colours in. That's, we always call it the DNA. But you could do the same with a garden. You might have a beautiful sculpture or a focal point that you then build out from, which could be a beautiful opportunity.
Absolutely.
But like you say, you can have fun with it. It doesn't have to be very serious.
No, exactly. And it could be just something that, has been an heirloom, and it could, for years and years, it could be something as simple as a bird bath that can, elevate and create interest. Not only that, but bring the wildlife in. Also, I found from a reclamation place, it was a wrought iron table with a dark green marble top on it. And it's slightly larger than a bistro table. But I have it nestled in my garden, in amongst the shrubbery, and I've just put a hurricane lamp on it. So that just lights up with some candles. When we've got people coming to stay and we want to use the garden and entertain, it just creates a little bit of interest with a few little plants in pots around it. It's just beautiful.
A really simple thing to do is the wind chimes for the garden.
Yes, of course.
They just carry you away to somewhere else, don't they?
Yeah.
And I've got a couple in my garden, and even in the winter you can hear it faintly. It just adds another dimension again. A garden is a sensory place to be. Sound is also important to bring in, isn't it?
Yeah, I think sound most definitely is, trickling of water. I mean, trickling water, some people say, oh, that makes me want to go to the toilet. Other people just absolutely love it. There's another garden that I designed a couple of years ago, and they already had a beautiful garden, but they needed to muffle sound from some road noise. So we designed a zinc water feature effectively with the planters either side, and the spout came out over their pool. And the water dropped into their pool, and it just created the most beautiful noise, but also masked a huge amount of noise. The other thing in gardens, just thinking of things moving, is I really like grasses that have got a nice sort of soft head on them, and that will just sway in the wind. They can give a little bit of noise as well. together with some hedging, like Elaeagnus, which has got a slightly silver gold and rear side of a dark green leaf,
Yeah.
well, an olive green leaf really. And then when the wind whips through those, it turns the leaf, and not only do you see a shimmer, but you've got this gorgeous noise.
Yeah.
And I think that's, it's all sensory, isn't it?
Yeah, that's amazing. It's so inspiring to talk to you, because now I want to go home and pull my garden up to speed. I really hope that we can talk to you every, quarter of the year and just say, what are the big jobs to do now? So we're heading from winter into spring. What sort of jobs should you be doing in the garden now, just to get it ready so it's not a horrible shock when suddenly things start to sprout and you haven't actually looked at them properly over the winter?
Well, I think this is, as you say, it's a dark, dank time of year. Leaves will have fallen from trees primarily. Lots of people will have already picked them all up and tidied everything up. But there's still probably a lot of gardens where there's leaves lying, probably damp and murky in amongst the planting borders. I'll clear those out of the way. What you need to do is gather all the leaves together, put them in a black bin liner, tie a knot in it, pick the surface, and then leave them in a dark corner. And then in time, it will create the most gorgeous composty mulch to lay over the top of your planting. The other thing to do is, if you have missed planting your bulbs back in the end of the year and you really want some colour this time of year, nurseries and garden centres will be able to provide you with already planted pots of narcissi and tulips and things like that. So they are more expensive to buy this way, but at least you know what you're going to get and what colour they are. Pop a few of those in the garden. It's a quick fix and will just freshen up, together with planting some pots with some of those bulbs as well. And that just gives you something really pretty to look at.
I think it's something to look forward to, isn't it? And when you
It is,
see the first daffodils, I mean, as snowdrops are coming up, and it does make me smile, because I think, gosh, this horrible dark winter it's on its way out. And when you see the daffodils, that really does make you feel happy.
It does.
And the colour, it's incredible. I've got a jumper that is colour of daffodils, and if it's a dark day, I just think I'm going to put that on because it makes me feel so much better.
Because you love colour as well, don't you?
Yes.
You love everything about colour. And gardens can be very boring unless you put colour into them. And thought needs to be taken into, as much as it does on the interior as it is on the exterior, as to what sort of colours you want to see throughout the year, and thought to be taken to make sure that happens.
If you wanted to plant things that you can cut flowers for your house throughout the year, putting that thought into where it's going to go in the garden now also not only saves you money, but will look amazing. Is there a few nice plants you could recommend cut flowers through the summer?
Okay, so cut flowers through the summer. I love a peony.
Oh, yes.
They don't last very long.
No.
They can be quite difficult if they aren't in the right light, or the right, very, very sensitive to the level of soil. So if they're not flowering, always look at the level and the lighting, because plants grow around them and then it doesn't get enough light, then it doesn't flower. So peonies, I would love always to plant those. Roses are really good for a cut flower. I keep going back to my Pythosporum. I know it's not a flower, but it is an evergreen plant that is fantastic for flower arranging.
Okay.
Fantastic for just sticking in a vase. Fantastic for putting into a wreath if you want to create a wreath for your, your door. Any of those sort of plants are great. So if you want to go and buy from your local supermarket even a bunch of daffodils, or tulips or lilies, to have some nice greenery to tuck in with that, then I think, they always really, really help. I quite often leaves rather than cutting flowers, because I want to keep my flowers outside.
Yeah.
I love alliums, but I like to see them on the outside. What I will do with my alliums is let them stay in the garden for as long as they are, even though they're a shell with seeds.
Yeah.
And that creates a beautiful
architectural. Yeah.
And then I cut them. They're in the garage drying, and then I tie them to my Christmas tree.
Oh, wow.
And that, together with just white lights,
it's very pretty.
It's absolutely stunning. See, or using them in a vase as an architectural structure with a little bit of greenery and some of those little mini wired fairy lights, stunning.
That sounds lovely. Well, thank you so much for all that information. I think we could sit here and talk all day about it. It's such a massive subject. We'll put all of Dani's details onto the podcast information, and definitely would love to invite you back here with us to talk about the early summer garden. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been an absolute delight talking to you.